Good morning, everybody. Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton. It's time for the Saturday conversation. We got a special guest today. That's Josh Pate, college football analyst for CBS, also the host of Josh Pate's College Football Show, available on YouTube. A lot of you guys know him well and have seen his stuff throughout the years. I've known Josh now for a few years myself. Back in the day, always a pleasure to visit with you, Josh. And thanks for joining the show, man.
Yeah, look, we get to rub our hands together. We got a home playoff game out there. I didn't necessarily think we'd be saying that a couple of weeks ago.
No, I thought Texas might be getting a bye, but Georgia had other plans. Georgia clearly beating Texas up front, primarily on the offensive and defensive lines at times. Georgia strung together some good run game there in the second half. But I tell you what, Josh, I want to talk about the college football playoff overall with you and some broader topics in college football that I think are germane to Texas fans and to college football fans generally. Let's talk about the college football playoff and just start with that. Do you think it's fair what the college football playoff has wrought? And I'm not talking about Alabama not being in or Ole Miss. I'm not even talking about that. I'm actually talking about the 1 and 2 seed having a rougher go than the 3 or 4 in some respects. I mean, I think it's kind of sad how it turned out overall.
Well, the concept of that is not wild, right? The concept of the higher seeds being rewarded with buys, that's not the wild part. The wild part and the screwed up parts, of course, in the format, the devil always in the details. And Bobby, I'm surprised a lot of people had to wait until Sunday to realize it was messed up. Like when they presented this format, I vividly remember going on our show, and I wasn't even an expansion guy to begin with, but I made a vow to the audience, hey, what's done is done. I'll go along with it. But then they put the format out there, and I said, okay, I'll go along with it. But you guys realize what this could mean, right? You're guaranteeing the conference champs are the ones with the first round bye. Here's the problem with it. It doesn't just end at, I don't think Arizona State should have a bye. I don't think Boise should have a bye. If it was just that, it'd be bad enough. But it's what happens downstream in the bracket because of those top 4 being what they are. And so I cannot imagine James Franklin in Penn State right now, just as an example. They could lose in the first round for all I know, and that still wouldn't change the point that they got the most favorable draw imaginable. In some cases, they've got a better shot of winning the title than some of the teams that have first-round buys have a shot of winning the title. And then you also lump into that they're in the half of the bracket where the big shark fin, Georgia, is without its starting quarterback. So, like, who knows what could happen there? But what I just want to make sure people understand is the point stands regardless of what the outcome ends up being. Because I think a lot of folks will take the cowardly way out of saying, well, I guess we just got to see how it plays out. No, it's played out already. The tournament's not what I'm talking about. The viability of Boise to win or Arizona State to win, that's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about what has and hasn't been earned. And to me, playing in a G5 level conference period should never earn you the right to have a first round bye in this thing. It should never earn you the right. You ought to have a spot maybe, but never a first round bye. So I've had a lot of issue with it. I thought it was the easiest thing in the world to see coming. I think we'll probably not waste a whole lot more breath arguing about it because I think a couple of years from now it will be changed. What the change is may be less palatable than what the original is, but I think we're very much in a state of flux right now.
Yeah, you're talking about potentially going from 12 teams to 14 as a possibility, eventually even to 16. We've thought about. I would say this, just look at the parallels that you see in the NCAA basketball tournament. There are 4 number 1 seeds in that tournament, and there can be 3 of them from a single league,
right?
If they are that good. I think that college basketball folks will say, yeah, but there's more games to be played, more interconference play in the preseason, so you can kind of see where teams are aligned and who they go up against well, et cetera. But I mean, college football, they have to get over this notion that the rest of college football, that it's not Big Ten SEC heavy. If you're a Big 12 member or you're an ACC member or a group of 5, you need to get over the notion that somehow college football is slanted towards the SEC and Big Ten. It is slanted, but justly so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the follow-up there, the very end of that statement is the most important part. It's the same thing I fight all the time. I'll have folks claim that I'm showing SEC bias. And then you go back and you say, well, is that true? Let me go see what I said. And you go review what you said and you said, I don't see any issue with it. And what you come to realize is you're just stating facts. Just people don't like the facts. And if the facts are what you're upset with, that's way different than me giving some hot take or some opinion that you disagree with. That's way different than me actually carrying water for Greg Sankey or Tony Petitti, because there are people out there who serve as de facto mouthpieces for the league office. There is that. I don't like it any more than anyone else does. But to understand the structure of college football is to understand the whole thing is a funnel. It does bleed down into or towards certain areas. They are tributaries that lead to bigger bodies of water. You don't have to like it. I would even admit I don't love that, but I understand that it is what it is. I don't like going to the DMV. I had to do it last week. It is what it is. So that's kind of where we've been headed for a while.
All right, let's switch gears here and talk a little bit about Texas in its first year in the SEC. I think maybe some SEC teams were a little surprised by the Longhorns. They wanted to, I think, find a reason for Texas to have been as good as they were this year. Yet there we were in Atlanta a week ago playing for a SEC title. What were your thoughts on this season for Texas and Oklahoma, and whether or not they now officially belong in the SEC?
Well, I mean, I thought they belonged the moment they got added, because why does Missouri belong in the SEC? Like, why does A&M belong? Why does anyone belong? They belong because they got an invitation. So, yes, they belong in the SEC. I thought Texas and Sark did a really good job the day that news broke a few years back of understanding the task at hand and understanding how to build a roster. And look, I'm not so sure he wouldn't have built it that way even if you guys were still in the Big 12. But knowing you were going to the SEC, I think added a little urgency maybe within the rest of the organization to get your act together, to build from the inside out. I think the beautiful part about the way they've gone about their business is they've understood how to, in my opinion, about as well as you can do, balance how to build a roster through high school and develop internally with supplementing via the portal, because that offensive line is not portal made. That wide receiver room may be portal made. So there's a lot of mixture there that I think should serve as the blueprint for other programs. Now, granted, it's hard. Not everyone can do what Texas does. Not everyone has the resource that Texas has. But it's not just about having deep pockets. I think one of the big lessons there is when you've watched Texas or you've watched Oregon play this year, those are both big-time NIL operations. Make no mistake about that. However, if you look at the guys who are on the field, if you look at the way they go about their business, there is a very Texas way. There's a very Oregon way they go about their business. Okay, so that means that what's happening there is a lot more than just being able to go get the talent. It's having a culture, and it's having basically the soil that you plant the seeds in. You'll get the best seeds you can possibly get, but you better have cultivated the proper topsoil to plant them in, because that's what wins, man. Like the culture stuff, people think it's so bygone, and people think it's just, it's cliche ridden, it's coach speak. It wins. It's every bit as important today as it always has been. And you're around that place a lot more than I am. But when I'm in that building, it's no different than when I'm in Athens. It's no different than when Saban was at Alabama. You go in there, yeah, you got the best players in the world. But man, the collective, like the sum of the parts, is still insanely efficient and operating at a high level, because there is a way of doing things there. It's not just a bunch of mercenaries walking the hallways. And you got to maintain that. Now, the challenge is, even if you do all that, still no guarantee you win. They went 0-2 against Georgia. They may come up on them again in the playoff, depending on how the dominoes fall. You just do all that, Bobby, to put yourself in position to take a swing every year. It takes doing that just to be in the conversation every year. But I think at the very least, we heard a lot of silencing of critics who said, well, because he didn't do it at Washington or he didn't do it at USC, he won't be able to do it there. Well, that'd be as ignorant as saying because Nick Saban didn't do something at Michigan State, he never would have done it at LSU or Alabama. Like there's a progression that some of the best have to go through. Sark's gone through it. A lot of them went through it. Ryan Day, I think, is going through it right now. He's just going through it in a little different way because he started at Ohio State instead of starting, as Jim Harbaugh would say, on first base. So I've got a lot of confidence in the future of that program. I've got far more questions about Oklahoma, as I think everyone does. I was doing radio earlier this morning as you and I are talking, and I was asked about Oklahoma, and it was juxtaposed to like a Florida State or an Oklahoma State, programs that just collapsed this year. In a really weird sense, I have a little bit bigger concern about Oklahoma. My concern is I know why FSU flamed out. They just played portal roulette and they lost. That's as simple as that. I know why Oklahoma State flamed out, because they're not an elite recruiting program. And now in moving forward in the new age of college football, you just got to bake in the possibility that you have a dead season. If the portal treats you the wrong way and you can't backfill, you're just going to have a dead season, especially in a league as competitively balanced as the Big 12. At Oklahoma, they had 3 top 10 recruiting classes baked into that roster. They had the quarterback they handpicked that was starting for them. I think losing Levy cost them a lot more than anyone wanted to admit. But Oklahoma, from a 50,000-foot point of view, had built their team the way I would say it's supposed to be built, and it was still that bad this year. That concerns me a little bit more. It's not like I'm selling stock or whatever, but it does concern me a little bit more.
Now, Josh, before we talk to the next point here, I want to say thank you to our sponsor of the Saturday conversation this morning, South Point Dodge. Texas football fans, score an easy extra point this season with South Point Dodge. When you get to the point at South Point Dodge, they have more than 600 vehicles in stock, and their award-winning sales team does not do games or gimmicks. They just get straight to the point by getting you the best deal out there. So score big today at South Point Dodge. Come see us off I-35 in South Austin or at southpointdodge.com. Get to the point at South Point Dodge. South Point Dodge is Austin's automotive everything. Looking to sell your car even? Get South Point's best offer over the phone or online. Again, South Point Dodge in South Austin off I-35. I'll tell you what, the worst loss in the SEC this year was not Alabama to Vanderbilt. It was Alabama to
absolutely. I mean, yeah. Alabama was still alive for everything after the Vanderbilt loss.
Worst loss in the conference this year, in my opinion. All right, talking a little bit about the future of college football. You mentioned the portal, NIL. Where do you see some key trends right now in the future of college football?
I think there are a lot of major head coaches just trying to hold on through this storm right now, because there's hope that on the horizon there's a lot more settled landscape. Whenever you get into the revenue sharing era, there's a lot more settled landscape. I've been in the office of 2 major head coaches in the past month. These are established names. They have won at a high level, and both of them have confided in me that, man, if this were to continue like this, if I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, I'd probably get out right now and go do TV. And what's causing them to hang on is they love making millions of dollars. They love coaching, like they love the aspect of it. They hate being a full-time fundraiser. They hope that in the future with RevShare, what it gets back to understanding how to allocate your resources, but understanding once you get your guys, they're going to be here to a large degree. The portal will greatly die down in churn rate. And it's about getting your guys in the building, winning with your guys, developing your guys, basically getting back to the tenets of what coaching is actually supposed to be. I think there's a hope, and I'd include myself in that. I think there's a hope from a bunch of us that may be where the sport is headed. The other thing is, again, no different than a fan would feel. I think people just want to have a consistent set of rules, like have the landscape just sit still for like 5 years, which has not been common lately.
No.
To just understand, man, if you're going to have rules overturn every 12 to 18 months, how am I supposed to build a program? I'm a firm believer that a lot of really good coaches will have ended up just getting lost in the churn here. And you'll look back 10 years from now and say, so-and-so, just Neil Brown, random name. Like Neil Brown at West Virginia, he may have been a really good coach. That's kind of weird. He was winning, and then he went to West Virginia and the hurricane hit and he looked terrible. I wonder in retrospect if he was just a really good coach that got caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think that's some of the stuff. And then, of course, the entire postseason format, I think, will change very, very soon. And I think a lot of what we argue about right now will be a moot point. But I just go back. I wonder this. You can't prove a counterfactual. I know that. But I've always been of the opinion that the tops of the tallest trees were going to be shaved off anyway, with the retirement of Nick Saban, first off. But secondly, with the introduction of NIL in the portal, that served to balance things and inject parity to the sport a whole lot more than the playoff ever did. I think the expanded playoff is going to get credit for doing what NIL in the portal actually did. There's no going back on that, obviously, but I almost wonder if people were searching in the wilderness for something that was right in their face the whole time, and then you think you got the answer dropped in your lap, but that's not the reason. The reason I know that is because, I mean, I think you just saw the same thing I did this year. Insane volatility week to week, insane competitive balance. Georgia just won the SEC, and they got skull-drugged by Ole Miss. They were down 30-7 to Alabama. They needed overtime to beat Georgia Tech. So even the best teams in the country were really getting by the skin of their teeth this year. We haven't even had a 12-team playoff yet. So how could the playoff have caused that?
Yeah, I will say this, too. The other thing about the portal, it allows you to go get a quarterback.
Yeah.
It's the most important position in college football. You see what's happened at Indiana. Teams like that need a quarterback. It can give them life that they didn't have before. And the portal is the great equalizer in some respects and gives you hope each and every year if you get the right guy. Hey, one of the things I wanted to mention and ask you about on the future of college football are the two 800-pound gorillas in the room, and that is the Big Ten and the SEC. How do you think they see the future of college football compared to everyone else? Do they, as Sankey, from my interaction and having heard him speak personally, has been, oh, we want everybody to succeed and all this other stuff. At the same time, he wants his fair share of the pie.
Yeah.
How do the Big Ten and the SEC work together to accomplish that, in your opinion? If there are 16 teams in the playoffs, are 12 of them from the SEC and Big Ten? Is that their view, or is 10 of them at least? What's their view?
This gets tough because there's so much nuance to whatever the correct answer is that most of the time you lose people by 20 seconds into your answer.
Yeah.
The answer is, I actually think there's a layer. I think there are a few layers of truth to the idea that your Greg Sankeys and Tony Petitis of the world understand it's best for the long-term health of the sport for all the conferences to matter. You've got to give oxygen to them, or else you have so marginalized your sport that you've cut off your nose to spite your face. You've been very penny wise, pound foolish with your approach, and everybody gets poorer as a result in the long term. I think there's an understanding of that. Okay, then that's one voice in your mind. Then the next voice in your mind, if you're them, says, but wait, we are the big dogs at the table. So we want to work with you, but what we're not about to do is pretend that all these conferences are equal and everyone should just like equity should be the name of the game in this room. This is not an equity-based sport. It never has been. It never will be. And you got to also understand, before you paint these people as Satan, you got to understand they are not their boss. The university presidents are their bosses. So one of the big talking points when Texas and OU first got added to the league was people want me to go on my show and call Greg Sankey out for being this evil, greedy dictator who just wants all the teams for himself. And I was like, hey, I'm not here to be a spokesperson for Greg Sankey. But let me explain to you something. Texas and OU were moving. And so imagine being Greg Sankey. According to your logic now, imagine saying thanks but no thanks to Texas and OU. And then the next day they go and they join the Big Ten, and you have to go to the president of Tennessee or LSU or A&M or whatnot. Well, A&M would have been fine with it, but you have to go to these league presidents, and you have to say, when they ask you, why did Texas and OU just join the Big Ten? Imagine telling them, well, they did knock on the door yesterday, but we turned them away. You're out of a job. You're fired. So there's what you'd love to do in an idealistic world. There's what you have to do sometimes in the realistic world. It's no different than anyone watching or listening to this. Sometimes you got to bite the bullet and do things at your place of business you don't exactly love doing. But, if you don't, then someone else has got your job tomorrow. I do think we're headed for a world where we probably expand the postseason. where you are guaranteed seats at the postseason. I think one of the things they will very, very strongly try and do is bake in the conference championship race as part of the postseason. And I put out an entire video on that as you and I were speaking this morning, talked about it on our show Tuesday night. I think you have to do that because I'll tell you one of the more troubling things that I observed this past weekend. I was in Dallas for the Big 12 game, but I mean, I'm normally at the SEC title game. Had a ton of buddies at the SEC and Big 10 title games, and a couple of them texted me independently saying the same thing. They're like, hey, especially in Atlanta, the building's full, the uniforms look great, two huge brands, but I can't help but notice a difference in the feel of this game versus years past. It has like kind of an exhibition game feel mixed into it. And
it wasn't a winner take all.
That's right.
It was not a winner take all. Alabama, Georgia last year, winner take all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you've got to be ahead of the curve. You have those jobs because you're ahead of the curve. You don't wait until that creeps into the full cake being baked 3 or 4 years from now. You address it now. You got to feel that stuff and have good instinct and see around the corner now. And I think what they'll do is in the future, hey, Bobby, it wouldn't surprise me in the future if that future version of the playoff was such that this year Texas and Georgia would have just gotten the first 2 seats at the table. They don't even play in a conference title game. You don't have a conference title game anymore. You just crown your regular season champ as your conference champ. You give your top 2 seeds the go right into the postseason, and then maybe your 3rd and 4th guaranteed shares. Those are decided by a 3 versus 6 and a 4 versus 5, couple of SEC play-in games, and that happens on Conference Championship Saturday. Same things happening at the same time in the Big Ten. Maybe the ACC has less guaranteed shares, but they're trying to fill out their guaranteed shares. I just think that postseason in the future is going to look way different. I think it should just be the top 12 in the country, but that's not the way it's going to go. The way it's going to go is every conference has a certain guaranteed allotment, and then you guys can decide how you fill the chairs every which way you want.
That's a really interesting idea that, college basketball has their week year-end tournament, but an extra couple of basketball games aren't going to put the wear and tear on a team like the conference champion. I mean, you look at Georgia right now; they don't have a quarterback because of the conference championship game. Now they won the conference championship, so ultimately they're probably happy. They got the number 2 seed; they're ultimately probably happy. But that extra game may have cost them a real shot at a national championship.
Sure.
Is the reality of it. So,
and if Penn State would have had that happen instead of Georgia, their season's over. I don't care if they get a first round bye. If Oregon had that happen instead of Georgia, their season's over. I don't care if they get a first round bye. So you are right about that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for spending time. Josh Pate, lead college football analyst for CBS, head of the Josh Pate College Football Show on YouTube. You guys are great. Josh, before I leave you here, I want to ask you one last question. You can be as short as you want to be, long as you want to be. Who do you think wins this whole thing?
Man, so I'm going to try and shorten this. I think there is a special sauce at Georgia right now that is going to absolutely relish in the idea that with that backup quarterback, they don't have a shot. I was talking to my friends at a certain major sports book yesterday. They downgrade Georgia a grand total of 1.5 points going from Beck to Stockton. Stockton is a program guy. That is a program. You guys have seen it at Texas this year. You've seen Beck perform less than admirably or get knocked out of a game, and Georgia still beat you twice. I think Georgia has it in them to do that, and that first round bye is going to be important. Oh, man, I flip-flopped last night hard on the show. I ended up going Georgia to win the whole thing because I'm tired of picking against them and being proven wrong. So I'm writing Georgia in light pencil right now.
Hey, I think Nick Saban's tired of picking Texas over Georgia and being wrong as well. All right. Hey, Josh, thank you so much, buddy. You have a good one and appreciate you very, very much for joining the show. Josh Pate, this has been On Texas Football's Saturday Conversation. Hook 'em.